Imagine losing a limb and then realizing you have no way to afford a prosthetic. For thousands of amputees, this isn't just a nightmare, it's reality. But today's guest is fighting to change that. I'm sitting down with Randy Titony, Executive Director of Limbs for Life, a nonprofit dedicated to providing prosthetic care to those who need it most. From financial barriers to state Medicaid gaps, we're diving into the real challenges amputees face and the life-changing work being done to restore mobility and independence. This is an episode about hope, advocacy, and action. So let's get amped up with Limbs for Life. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm great, and I've done some research on your organization. Very, very excited to talk to people in the charitable space. Always excited to speak to anyone that makes it their life's mission to help people like myself. And I know our community of listeners, as it grows, I tend to get a lot of messages, DMs, emails. Where do I go to get help? Please help me, Rick. Where do I go? How do I bridge the gap with insurance? How do I, find a prosthetic for me that is not going to wreck me financially? And, an organization like the one that you are the executive director of, Limbs for Life, that is what we are talking about today. So, of course, immediately, I want to thank you. I want to drop to my knees and say, thank you for helping us. But at the same time, I'm fascinated by people like yourself because, of course, you are not an amputee, but
I'm not.
Part of your life's mission is to help us. So I want to start there a little bit. Have you always worked in the charitable space? And
I have not.
No. Okay. So tell me a little bit more about your background before Limbs for Life.
Okay. So I sort of have lifelong said I'm, really sort of a capitalist. And so most of my life has either been in the physical therapy space. I practiced physical therapy for many years, but I live here in Oklahoma City, where one of the finest prosthetic facilities and sort of the mecca for really great prosthetics is. But I worked with the Scott Sablich prosthetic facility, and before that with his dad, John, and his grandfather, Lester. So John Sablich, who was really sort of a world renowned prosthetist, about 30 years ago, decided that we needed an avenue for people that were uninsured to get functional prosthetic care. And so he started with his own money, and the foundation began 30 years ago this year. So we launched the foundation, and I was lucky enough to be on the board for the first 10 years or so. Then I was raising kids and trying to practice physical therapy. And so I left the board, but I've always been involved. Really, my whole adult occupation has been either treating amputees, helping amputees, or involved with amputees in some way or the other. I coached disabled sports for many years. And so it's really just been, I don't know how to explain it, but a real passion of mine that I just really, really have had this lifelong desire to help people on this in this arena and in this fashion. And so in sort of the final chapter of my career, being tapped as the executive director of Limbs for Life is really sort of a lifelong deal for me, that it's just overwhelming, really, the gratitude that I have in the ability of what I've been given to help, individuals like you, Rick. So that's a big explanation, I know, but
No, it's
something.
No, it's incredibly relevant to this conversation, and I appreciate you sharing that and knowing that what blossomed in you as just a need to help people, and also how your career path sort of took you into the amputee space. and having those interactions with people like myself, and then sort of building that catalog in your mind of, okay, well, what do these people need? What are the deficiencies in this community? And, the physical therapy piece, I mean, very critical for myself, and, all the physical nature, right, of being an amputee, incredibly challenging, depending on your fitness level, depending on your age, depending on your comorbidities, all of these things that make every single amputee totally unique.
Right.
That is, certainly one end of the spectrum. But then, as most amputees relate in this conversation that we're having, well, what about the logistical piece? What about the gear? What about the stuff, the tech? Like, how am I going to get positioned in a way that I can function well, get the tools that I need, right? Because if I say, Randy, I need you to build my house, and I give you nothing to do that with, or I give you a set of rusty tools, or I say, well, I'm not a big believer in power tools, here's a hammer and a couple of nails, you're going to be challenged. And that is completely, not even connected to what you're capable of physically. It's simply the circumstance of, how am I going to navigate this if I can't build those bridges into prosthetics, into a prosthesis, into the hardware that I need to thrive? Because for myself, of course, the version of me physically, before amputation was very different than the version of me now, because I realized that to make forward progress, I was going to need to up my game physically. I was going to need to become more fit. I was going to need to dedicate more of my time to my body. But also, a very, very important element was, how am I going to navigate prosthetics? How am I going to get myself the prosthesis that is going to help me on this journey, which is a constant evolution? Because a lot of
Right.
people will say, well, when you're born, right, with an amputation or a limb difference, there's this huge spectrum of changes that your limb goes through. It's that way for every amputee, you know?
Right.
And I want to talk more about what you're doing specifically to create those bridges for people, to close those gaps and help someone that is experiencing those deficiencies. So, sort of take me through the intake process.
So, one of the big things that we want people to know, whether they are patients, clients, or service providers, prosthetists, manufacturers, is that, we're not a pass through. We're not just an agency that you apply to, we check some boxes, you go have a leg made, and we write a check. That's not who we are. That is not who I am. I don't want anything in my personal life or my professional life to be transactional. If I drive through Starbucks or my local coffee shop, I want that to be an experience, right? How are you today? Whatever that is, I want to, sort of leave a mark there. And so we really want to connect with the clients or patients that we're dealing with. I, for one, I've used some strange analogies. I say, look, I don't know what it's like to be an amputee, but it's like, for a silly analogy, you're in freezing cold water, and I'm standing on the side and I'm looking, and I can say, I assume that I know that it's really, really cold, but I'm not in that cold water with you because I'm not an amputee. But I've really just done all that I could to understand that I do know that you go to a prosthetist and you get fit, And sometimes our short-sighted vision says, oh, everything's great now. You're going to go home and everything's going to be fine. And I, through my physical therapy background, understand that it's not going to be fine. It's not going to be fine once you leave the office, because now you got to get in the car. You got to the facility without a leg. Now you got to get in the car with a leg. What does that look like? Is that with a walker, with a wheelchair, on crutches? Then you got to get home. And how do you get inside? And then how do you get in and out of the bathroom? And how are you going to take a shower? Do you need a shower chair? And now you woke up the next day and you went and had, I don't know, some high sodium food, or you went to a baseball game and you ate a bunch of sunflower seeds, and now your leg
now
doesn't
your limb
fit.
is now your limb blew up.
Yeah. And so, understanding that and really talking some of these things through with our patients or clients is incredibly important. And we want them to know that we're going to do everything that we can to be with them through that process. And if we're local, if they are local to us, or, a lot of times I will go to their appointments with them and meet with them and their practitioner to see what else do they need that we might be able to provide. Because, I want the experience. Again, I thoroughly understand that losing a limb is a traumatic, lifelong thing, that I have friends that I've known that have limb difference that have lost their leg 25 years ago, and it's still, not easy for them every single day. And so I'm circling back to your original question of what does the application process look like? So someone is referred to us by a social worker, a prosthetist, friend, seeing us online, doing a Google search, wherever that might be. They go online, they fill out an application. Now, a lot of this information that I'm going to give you has been set forth by our board and policies. So the first one is you have to be a U.S. resident or a U.S. citizen, or you have to be in the U.S. on a permanent resident visa, which is a green card. Now, we have people that say, why is that? Why? That's not fair. And I say, it's very simple. It's an economic issue. We have way more people applying than we are able to help every year. And so that's just a simplistic way of saying, well, we're going to set some parameters.
Oh, it's a necessary piece of calculus.
Right. So if you're in the U.S., you're undocumented, or you're outside the U.S., we will supply you parts and or components and supplies at no cost. So everything we do is at no cost to the patient, whether that's supply. We had a phone call this morning that said, hey, do you all supply soft goods? I said, absolutely. Doesn't have to be someone that we have funded. It doesn't have to be someone that's on a green card or a U.S. citizen. We will supply those if we have them. So the patient fills out an application. They go and see a prosthetist and have an evaluation by the prosthetist. We want to make sure that they're functionally able to wear a prosthesis, that their health is good enough to wear a prosthesis, and that the prosthetist feels that they're a good candidate. From then, we run a criminal background check. What that entails is we look at their background and see if they've been convicted of crimes and what those crimes are. A lot of times people call and say, what does my background have to do with it? Or what things do we not fund, so on and so forth. And I say, well, again, we look at every individual case. If you've been convicted of a felony that involves you've been violent to another human being, you've sold drugs to children, you've been convicted of assault and battery or spousal abuse, things typically that are violent. I'm a forgiving person. We're a forgiving society. There are things that people have done in their past that we, hopefully that they've learned from and moved on, and we will fund those patients. But so criminal background check, then we make sure that they don't have insurance or they don't have any other means of support. And then the prosthetic facility has agreed to make the leg. Someone has agreed to support them through the process, whether that's living arrangements or whatever that might be. And then once we have the funds set aside and the patient has sent in all of the documentation that we need, their driver's license and all of that stuff, then we send it to the prosthetic facility and they can make the leg. One of the neat things about us is, unlike an insurance company, once the leg is made, we pay in about a week's time. So we have arrangements set up with, I say every prosthetic facility, but not everyone, but hundreds upon hundreds throughout the United States. And so we pay at a drastic discounted rate. So the socket is brand new. Oftentimes, we're going to use refurbished or recycled foot pylon, and then donated knees for for above the knee amputees. But we are able to provide a fully functioning prosthesis at a drastically discounted rate. So we write checks to prosthetic facilities for below knee or above the knee.
Yeah, that's so the experience piece, I think, is the thing I want to press into, because so much of that journey is filled with so much anxiety,
Oh gosh,
so much trauma. And to understand, as a foundation, that it's not just hey, check the boxes, we write you a check, good luck.
Right.
That it's actually somewhat the antithesis of that, which is, let's go on this journey together. Let's try to figure out how to get you positioned the right way, get you the tools that you need, the support that you need, and that way we can engineer some success. Now, people often ask me, well, why aren't, and this is usually non-amputees, but still some amputees, they'll say, well, why aren't the insurance companies covering this stuff? I'll let you answer that.
It's very simple. Insurance companies are in business to collect premiums, not pay out claims. That's the reason. Prosthetic devices are very expensive. If they can get out of paying them, they will.
Yeah. And that's really, the short answer. And we can take a deeper dive into medical necessity and all of these other things that they like to use in terms of complex language when they deny things. But that is the simple answer, is that they're in the business to make money. And it's really about, like you said, collecting those premiums, being very, very careful about what we are willing to spend money on. And yes, most people do not realize that the prosthesis that I'm wearing right now, is over $10,000.
Absolutely.
And I'm a below knee. So once we start getting into the above knee spectrum of prosthesis, with microprocessors and special knees, and I mean, gosh, the technology just continues to move more and more rapidly. These prosthetics are they're a fortune. I mean, they are just big money.
That's sort of the issue, is that, Rick, if you just needed it once, the insurance company would say, oh, look at us, aren't we great? Here, we're going to buy this for you. But no, they know that you're going to get your temporary or your prep socket, and then you're going to shrink down. So in 6 months, you're going to need another one. And then in a couple of years, and so they know that, this is a lifelong thing. And they're like, we don't want to get involved in this.
Yeah, no doubt. And I very much was surprised in my own, journey as a new amputee, how much things were going to change over a pretty rapid amount of time. And I was fortunate enough that my insurance did cover a large amount of my care, my aftercare, and then put me in a pretty good track to work with one of the major carriers, one of the big houses, as they say in prosthetics. And I really struggled. I really struggled to get a patient focused experience. And I will tell you, because I know, obviously you're from based in Oklahoma. Martin Bionics was the game changer for me.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I was in a rigid socket originally. I had tremendous amount of breakdown, skin breakdown. Um, I had a natural, very, very, very bony prominence on my residual limb that was not addressed. It was sort of, I guess the way it was pitched to me was, this just happens. This is normal. You'll get used to it.
Right.
You need to work through the pain. These were the things I was told. And
Right.
I see so many amputees at that intersection. Randy, they give up. They're like,
Right.
they're like,
Right. Because they think that's normal.
I can't do this. Like, this is
Right.
not. And then the resentment builds. They see the high performers, they see the Paralympic
Yep.
athletes, and they're like, why is this not working out for me? How is it that that
Right.
person is running and I
Right.
can't
And I
even
can't walk to the
I
bathroom.
can't even walk to the bathroom? Exactly. And it's like, what on earth is going on here? Like, somebody help me with this, right? And a teacher once told me, when you channel stubbornness in the right way, it's a good characteristic, because I got really stubborn about, I need to find a way
That's right.
that's going to make this work. And when
Right.
I heard about the idea of an adjustable, I thought, that's interesting. I don't know anything about prosthetics. I don't know anything about how the residual limb changes over time. I really don't understand volume and how it increases and decreases and all this other stuff. But this idea seemed a little innovative, different from what I had, I guess, independently researched. And that particular socket, that particular experience put me on a path of success, because it allowed me the ability to manage my volume, be able to tighten, loosen. When I went and saw Amy Scuda, who I'm sure you know,
Amy's on our
I
board.
know she is.
Yeah.
I do my
Yes.
I do my research.
Yes. Yes.
So Amy was a godsend. She literally sat me down and said, "We can work with this. We're
Right.
going to cut away on your bony prominence. We're going to stay off it. We're just going to
Right.
we're just going to we're just going to let it be what it wants to be, and we're going to build around that." Huge game changer. Now, fast forward, 6, 7 years, I'm in a rigid socket now. I'm fine. But in terms of that evolution, which every amputee goes through, right? Because there's a process to this, like you're mentioning, we have to be able to adapt the equipment to where we're at in that process. So as I became more fit, more capable, as my limb matured more and more and more, those needs kept changing with it, right? So you understand, getting someone in that particular lane, if they're dealing with all of this, excuse me for saying, but bullshit about insurance and all this stuff, I mean, talk about just a massive deal breaker for them. Like, you know how hard it was for me to get one socket? Now I'm going to try to get another one.
Right.
I went through
Right.
hell and high water just to get this, and now I've aged out of it. I've
Right.
evolved out of this. Now what do I do? Where do I go, right? So I think that experience piece, engaging someone, giving them resources that are not just the wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, It's a,
Sure.
hey, let's go on this journey with you and figure out how to get you what you need to create long-term success. And I when I talk to people like yourself, I always wonder, hey, tell me about a success story that, you'd like to share, something that you saw firsthand in real time and, that had an impact on you.
Well, we're going to need more time.
There's so
Uh,
many, right?
yeah, I don't know early on in my career how or why amputees were really a segment of patients that I really sort of was drawn to and thought, I can really help, really help these people. And I've just been so incredibly fortunate in where I've been and working. Again, we have the mecca of Martin Bionics here in Oklahoma City, the Sablich facility. Hanger has a huge facility here. It's really just a great spot for prosthetics. And so whether they're Paralympic athletes, Derek Loxodent, I've got a picture in my office of me giving Derek Loxodent a hug. I mean, he won 2 silver medals at the Paralympics
Yeah.
last summer. I met him at one of his lowest periods when he first lost his leg. And,
Yeah.
I said, look, I'm an old guy and you're a young kid, but I know this. You're going to have a very successful life. I see you as an athlete. I see you succeeding. I see you accomplishing great things. And, it almost brings tears to my eyes to even think about him or talk about him because, last summer he wins 2 silver medals. He's featured on a Delta commercial where he's the main subject matter. The Oklahoma City Thunder did a documentary about him called Steps and his journey. And so, to think, I was there in the very first and sort of just said, here, let me just help you stand up and get moving, and um, Richie Horvat, a young 21-year-old kid who now, I sort of feel like he and I are connected at the hip now. A year ago in October, he ran out of gas, called his father. His father came to bring gas. They were on I-35 outside of Fort Worth. When they're putting gas in the car, a distracted driver hit them,
Mm.
killed his father instantly. Richie lost his leg above the knee, and his life has been, devastatingly different ever since then. His fiance at the time, now they're married, Mary Ann, sent Limbs for Life a Facebook message with a news article. And I click on it, I watch the news article, I hear the story, and I just respond back and I said, do you know these people? And she said, I'm the woman in the story. This is my fiance. And I said, we absolutely can help you. Give me a call at the office. Well, fast forward 6 or 8 months, they come to Oklahoma City. We meet with them, and we're, now surrogate family to Richie and Marianne. And she said, I just want you to know. And I don't say this so people think that we're great. I say this because this goes to the essence and the heart of our mission and who we are. She said, we contacted everybody that anybody directed us to, whether it was, a local charity or national charities or whoever it might be. But we were given your name by a social worker in the hospital. And she said, you immediately reached out to us and said you could help us. And nobody else even called us back.
Yeah.
And I said, it's just incredibly sad for that. And I'm, just heartwarming for us that we were able to help. But, those two right there of young kids that have their whole life ahead of them and that we've been able to be there at their darkest times because of our donors. It's really not because of me. It's because of the 30 years of existence of Limbs for Life that we're celebrating this year, of all the wonderful people that have donated money, that have seen the passion in our work and seen the great outcomes. And so that's just two. And I could go,
Yeah.
on and on and on.
And I
And
see probably what you've done in those 30 years is probably just very much this community of just incredible, philanthropy, support, advocacy, um, people that see the good work that you're doing and want to be part of that energy. And I think that is such a huge lesson, especially nowadays in the climate that we live in,
right,
in this country that, what are the things that can unite us? Let's set aside all the differences and all the talk and all the posturing and all that. That's all fine. Everyone has opinions. But
right,
what is the thing that can bring us together, that can make us feel like we have more strength and less weakness or division? And I look at, you know, foundations, people like yourself, bringing, no matter what your position is, culturally, socially, politically,
right,
religiously, bringing those people together and saying, but look what we can do when we come together. Look at the
right.
lives that we can change. You know, that's when the magic happens. And I think that's when we realize, oh man, we are powerful when we come together, right? And pull our resources, not just in the money sense. Don't get me wrong.
Mm.
The money is really important. It's very
Right.
important. I don't hide from that. I was doing an interview with Billy Brimblecom from Steps.
Love Billy. He and
Yeah,
I are friends.
from Steps of Faith. And I said,
Yeah,
Billy, you know what I like about you? That you don't hide from the simple request of, hey, everyone, we need money.
absolutely.
He just puts it out there. And
Right.
because very often I meet people in the charitable space and they kind of tiptoe around it, and they very careful with their word choices sometimes. And I'm like, no, we need support. We need the money. But there's of course the volunteering that goes into
Right.
this. There is the giving of time and energy and spreading the word and sharing, the mission and trying to draw people in. Because someone will say to me, well, I don't have money for that. And I'm like, well, that's okay.
That's right.
Do you have time? Do you,
Right.
are you willing to share a post? Are you willing to, I don't know, maybe share it with someone who has the resources? Because
Rick,
I'm not the richest person on the planet, but I know a couple pretty wealthy people.
when you said share a post, I'm like, people don't understand how important that is. You're just helping carry the message out.
Let's
It's
build
really,
momentum. Let's keep the momentum going,
that's right.
I,
That's right.
I always think of it like the wave, at the stadium, be part of the wave, man. All you got to do is
Right.
stand up. It's not that hard. So
That's
I always say charity is, I know for some people they sort of go, whoa, I'm not in a position. I'm like, we're all in a position to help
right. Of some sort.
of some sort. Everyone has a grain of sand. Where are you going to put it?
Yep.
Where are you going
That's
to
exactly
where
right.
are you going to place it? I mean, that's a choice that we make. And, I want to talk about, in terms of that support of your organization, let's talk about how you fundraise. Where can people go? How can they get involved? You know, give us some more pathways to reach you.
Sure.
Speak to us in that regard.
So you said everybody has a grain of sand and it's where you put it. So 6 or 7 months ago, I was alerted by our program staff that a young lady had been donating $20. So, if you have nothing, you have nothing to give. And so this young lady, whatever her financial situation is, felt like, hey, I can't, I can't give $1 million, but I can give 20.
Yeah.
And so she donated $20 for so many years that she actually funded her own prosthetic device. And so I made a little video and sent it to her, and said, Mary, I just wanted to let you know how grateful we are. And I don't know if you know this, but you've given $20 every month so long that you've donated now over the lifetime $2,500 that funds a below the knee prosthesis.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's earth shattering. That is what we're talking about when we say, help us build a legacy. You know, there's a quote that says, you haven't lived today until you've done something for someone who can never repay you. And I can tell you that's a great, great feeling. And so she has done that. She's helped build a legacy, and we're really, really grateful for that. So you can help in many ways. You can go to our website, limbsforlife.org, and click on the donate now button. You can become a monthly donor, or you can give a one-time donation. You can help us in your community. You can say, I own a prosthetic facility, or I'm in prosthetic school. I just spoke to the class at Northwestern University last week, and they said, how can we help? I said, you could sell t-shirts. You could have a pickleball tournament. You can have a golf tournament. You can do a walk. You can do a bake sale. You can, so many things. And again, pennies add up to nickels, nickels add up to dollars, so on and so forth. And so another way is you can help share and like our posts. You can help that on all the social media channels, and then you can help introduce us to people that might be inspired by our message. Yes, we want donors, but we also want people that can get passionate about our mission. If someone writes us a check for $500 and we never hear from them again, that's great, but that's transactional. We want people to experience what Limbs for Life is about. We want them to feel the mission, feel the passion, feel what it's like when people put that leg on and leave, and when they get on with their life, and when they go back to their job or get a new job or finish school and raise a family. And the feeling of that is enormous, and we understand that. And we just want other people to feel that as well.
Oh, that's awesome. No, that's fantastic. And I'm glad that you see it as not transactional, right? That you see it as more of an engagement, and it's an energy that gets created. And when people sort of partake in that, sort of press into that and become part of that, it's such a win-win. And I always remember when I was a kid, and my father was always a really generous guy. And my mom would complain sometimes, like, you're a pushover, and you want to help everybody. And I remember someone coming to my father and asking, what they were asking for was a loan. And it was in my presence, so it was kind of a bizarre experience as a kid. And I remember my father looking at them and saying, no, I don't do loans, but I'll give you the money.
Right.
And I thought, wow, I've never heard that before. And I've always carried that with me. You know, you have to give without an expectation of getting
Right.
something back. Um, and because I've engaged so many people in the charitable space with amputees, I get so much out of knowing them, being part of their efforts. Now knowing yourself, this for me, being able to share your story, the organization, your mission with our listeners, I get so much out of it. For me, there's this huge ROI, right?
Right.
Because we're gonna produce
Okay.
this episode, we're gonna put it out on our channels, we're gonna promote it, we're gonna talk about it. We want to give the community resources like Limbs for Life because it's so necessary. It's so necessary for people to that maybe felt they didn't have a way to get mobile again, or had lost all hope in being able to find an organization that could help them. Now they have that little light at the end of the tunnel that says, "Hey, we're here. We want to help. Let's see if we're a good fit for what you're trying to do." And I'm sort of blown away too by the way in which you procure parts and pieces and all of that stuff. I would think that exchange, um, I mean, that's got to be a big endeavor as well. Like how is all of that sort of parsed out and figured out? And I do recall when I went to my prosthetist once, guy named David Rotter. He's here in Illinois, and he had all of this hardware like in this back hallway, just
Right.
collecting. And the first time I saw it, I thought, "Oh, that's a little strange. It looked like I don't know, like a used robot warehouse or something." And then I went a second time, and I thought, "Wow, it's just continuing to grow. Like all of these parts and pieces, feet and ankles and knees and all this stuff." And then when I started learning about the way in which foundations will repurpose some of this stuff, it all made sense to me. Like, how does all of that work for your team?
Well, we let every prosthetic facility that we work with know, and we broadcast it on social media channels too, that we want your old legs. And so we try and make that again as non-transactional as possible. We know the heartache because we've been closely, related to people that um, their loved one has passed away, and they may have just gotten a prosthesis, recently, and so they are emotionally connected to that. And so when they say, I want to donate this, hopefully someone can use that, we know that that's a really big undertaking and it's an emotional process for them. So we let them know that, oftentimes someone will call up and say, they know the value of a sea leg. And, a lady called and said, I have a sea leg. It's about 2 years old. And I said, this doesn't happen very often, but I'm going to tell you, this is the young man who we're going to send your sea leg to. We're about to fund him. He's a 21-year-old individual, and we're going to send that sea leg there. And she was just, emotional and really overjoyed. And I said, this is the power. This is the impact that your donation has. And so, as you know, carbon fiber foot or pylon or pyramids, all these things that can really be used and used and used. We house those in our warehouse right next to our office here in Oklahoma City. It's 2,500 square feet. We have thousands of feet and thousands of pylons. And we ship many, 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 probably a couple of thousand a year overseas
Yeah.
for mission trips or, to Romp or to Penta or someone that's going to use those internationally. And so it's great for us that we know that people in underserved countries are going to benefit from our donors and from our work as well.
Yeah, Romp's doing some cool
One
stuff.
small piece of this also, Rick, that I want to point out is when you talk about being blessed and being fortunate, about 6 years ago, we were, again, incredibly fortunate to be given a gift by a gentleman in California that has set us up to be successful until the end of time. So I say that because I know the power that means. So we are now in a financial position at Limbs for Life that every dollar that is donated to us goes directly to funding prosthetics, period. It doesn't go to fundraising. It doesn't go to the overhead of the office. It doesn't go to anything. We have kind of a quasi endowment set up that funds the salaries, the overhead, and the expenses. And so now everything that comes in goes directly to funding prosthetics. We were a beneficiary of someone that we have known for 30 years that passed away six months ago, and she put us in her trust, and that funded the first 25 to 30 legs this year. So it's beautiful to be able to be in that position that we're not asking people to donate to cover, keeping the lights on. And we know that that's not the norm in the nonprofit world.
No, it's
So
not. No, it's not. That
it's
rock
easy to
solid
wake up and be
foundation.
excited.
Yeah, that rock solid foundation is, man, is that awesome that when people
Yeah.
do donate, they know, like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm not paying the electric bill. I'm not
Right.
paying for copy paper. I'm paying
That's right.
for someone to get a leg. That my
Right.
money is funding their ability to get a second chance at life. And that's
Right.
just, I mean, that's fantastic, and your journey has really inspired me, to continue my work in getting these messages out there, making sure that people understand what resources are available, and hopefully when people, you know, um, watch and listen to this episode, they will see that there is a lot of support out there, because I know most of the narratives that I see online are, admittedly, they're pretty dark.
Right.
And that's hard. That's hard for me to process sometimes, because I consider myself a pretty successful amputee. I returned to a lot of the things that I enjoy, and I work, and um, I feel in a lot of ways my life got better, as strange as that sounds, as an
Right.
amputee, because it changed my perspective. It recalibrated the way I looked at life, and I really started to focus more on the things that made me happy. And I let go of a lot of things that just didn't really matter or didn't serve me in terms of my purpose, in this place, before we leave. And it's it's funny because when I say that to someone, they do the curious head tilt, like a dog. Really? Like better? And I'm like, yeah, I get to meet, quality people every day that are doing great things in this community. I mean, I consider it a privilege to be able to talk to someone like yourself, or share stories with, these high performance athletes, or, practitioners in the field that are creating groundbreaking technology. And to be able to tap into that just completely affirms, like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the good stuff. And it's just been wonderful, and certainly wonderful meeting you. Um, the hour goes by so fast, it kind of freaks me out a little bit. Um, is there anything you want to say before we wrap today?
Well, I should have jumped in a little earlier and said this. I truly believe this with all my heart, and that is that when you were struggling, you kept getting up, so to speak, and searching out solutions until you found Amy Scuda at Martin Bionics. I know Amy very well, and I'm telling you, I feel that she is one of the hardest working, never give up attitude people that I have ever met. And your success probably was really catapulted by her
Mm-hmm.
really wanting to have a good experience and not just be transactional and say, well, you've just got to get used to it,
Yeah,
so
she
uh,
she
can't
was
never,
she's literally was like an angel to me. I mean, she
she's
swooped in, and she just and I remember at that time, it was a very, very anxious moment. It was I had just gotten out of wound therapy because I did not do well in a prep. I did not do well in my first socket. I was really in a place of, oh my gosh, can you help me? Is there
Right.
anything? Do you have a magic wand? Because I'll believe it if you say
Yes.
magic wands exist.
Yes.
Please help me. And she was just so calm. And yeah, we're gonna make this work. We can work with
Right.
this. We're gonna do this. And I just, in that moment, it was like that, like that come to Jesus moment, like, okay, I have faith. Like,
Right.
let's go. Let's do it. And, I was with Martin for about 3 years, about 3 years, and just going through, as my limb kept getting smaller and, revisiting, and I'd make a 12-hour drive, to Oklahoma, and every minute of it was worth it. It really was. And you're right. She was just the guiding light. She was the person. She was my person in that situation that just made it all happen. And if she was here now, I'd want to hug her,
Right.
because things have changed so much for me since we met. But I appreciate you saying that and acknowledging that, and that shows you know that you're a very giving person, that you realize that. And I say this to myself all the time, like, isn't that so much about me? you know it's a
No.
it's about something much bigger,
Right.
right, than you and I. It's being
Right.
part of something that's much bigger than ourselves, and
Right.
realizing that we can keep putting our grain of sand in the right place and keep nudging it forward. And Randy Titony, such a
Yes,
pleasure
sir.
to meet you today. Thank you so
It's great to
much
meet you.
for being part of the podcast. I cannot wait to get this out there and people learn more about Limbs for Life. That's going to wrap it up for us today. My name's Rick Bontkowski. This is the Amp'd UP211 Podcast, and I want to wish everyone health and happiness. We'll see you next time.